Hi, welcome to the Rittners Floral School in Boston, Mass. I'm Dr. Steve Rittner, and it's a pleasure to welcome you into one of our classrooms today. The time of year, it's around Thanksgiving, and we thought that it would be kind of fun to explore various options for centerpieces for this great holiday. Generally, we can go in so many different directions when it comes to Thanksgiving. We can go from the traditional to the ultra-contemporary, and there are many different kinds of expressions for this holiday. Let's show you a few, and I think you're going to enjoy this brief presentation. Our staff has been working very, very hard to come up with some examples of some of these things. Now, look at these two designs here. You've got on the right side here a design that's very, very traditional. Typically around Thanksgiving, we think in terms of the traditional palms, our colors, which happen to be oranges, yellows, reds, and so forth. So in this particular case, we've got something that is what we would normally consider a standard kind of Thanksgiving arrangement. It's got our palms, carnations, a few mini carnations. It's pretty, it's interesting. But let's show you the different directions you can go in when it comes to Thanksgiving designing, because here is something for somebody who may want a table centerpiece that's a little bit on the wild side. Now let's look at this one. This one is not for every person. You have to have very, very specialized tastes for this. It's a little bit more adventurous. We have here, of course, our palms, our bronze palms. We have a rose or two. We've got a gerbera tucked in over here. A couple of carnations here. But what makes this design very, very interesting is the blooming grevillea. Look at this stuff. Isn't it amazing? The blooming grevillea really gives it a little bit more personality and certainly makes this design feel very, very different. So we can go from one extreme to another. We can go with the very classical kind of look that's typically, traditionally associated with the holiday, but we can also go with something like this where we're doing the blooming grevillea and it comes out and gives a totally different look, and yet it is still appropriate to this particular time of year. Now we've got some other great examples of different centerpieces that we'd like to share with you that are just great for the holiday period. Here is an interesting one. This particular centerpiece, as you can see, has a rather interesting container. The container happens to be a very, very nice container that has moss that's actually attached to it so that it looks very, very natural with the sheet moss base on here. We have, again, a wide combination of materials in this particular one. When we're talking about Thanksgiving offerings, we can go from one extreme to another, and this is a very abundant holiday and therefore should have an abundant look in our designing. We've got, of course, our traditional carnations and some of our specialty palms here. That's kind of an interesting novelty. We've got the Athos green palms here, gerbera here. We also happen to have some of the little Hannah asters, which give a really nice effect. They're little red kind of accent flowers. And to make the design more interesting, we have also our roses, our Lysianthus here, some lilies that are tucked into the design, and then again some of the blooming grevillea add to it. And you can see that with this combination of flowers, this one's a little bit tighter. The flowers are closer together. We've got a greater variety. It gives us a very, very interesting kind of an effect because it's a little bit different than what we would consider the traditional. Here's another example taking it a step further. Again, a very similar kind of container. This container was a little bit shorter. This one's a little bit longer, has some interesting decorative motif built into it. This particular one, again, is using a combination of different kinds of materials to come up with a very nice effect. The flowers are in closer. It's a little tighter in a contemporary kind of styling. We've got our bronze palms here. Again, a few of our orange carnations. We have some of our spray roses in kind of an ivory white color. And what makes it very, very interesting is this is grevillea foliage that's coming out on both ends. So we could have just stayed with this in tight, but by bringing out the grevillea foliage, it gives it kind of a wild and interesting look. And the foliage is really, really neat. It gives a really neat look to the design. Incidentally, the grevillea that we're using in these designs has been provided by the great folks at Blooming & Beloit, Beloit, Wisconsin. They bring in some of these amazing materials, and they certainly enable us as floral designers to do some really, really cool things. Let's see what else we have. Taking the same motif, becoming even larger still, here is another one of our containers that happens to have the mossed kind of background to it. Very, very pretty. Again, making use of a combination of materials on this one. We have some of our orange carnations, some of our bronze palms, orange roses are tucked in here. What I think makes this particular design interesting is notice the use of the green hydrangea, which is not something we would normally associate with Thanksgiving, but why not? Why can't we mix some of our green hydrangea in as far as the holiday is concerned? The foliage has a combination of baker fern, but also several varieties of grevillea foliage, again from the great folks at Blooming and Beloit, Wisconsin. We have a few spray roses that are tucked in, and I love this particular flower. Our red rovers, aren't they amazing? Red rover chrysanthemums. It gives a very, very lush, a very, very pretty effect to the holiday, and I think you can see that we can really go in different directions here. Now let's shift gears for a minute from our designs that happen to be based in a foam-based kind of situation. Of course, water-based designing has become very, very popular, and water-based designing meaning in glassware with water, and these certainly can be wonderful table centerpieces as well. And we've got a wonderful piece here that really looks great no matter what way you look at it. It's really, really cool. Again, a wide variety of mixtures in this particular design. Let's explore it. We happen to have here carnation, of course. We've got different varieties of palms working into this design. We also have an orange tulip along with our yellow rose, some lisianthus in here, our red rover chrysanthemum in this design. Our foliages in this design are quite varied. Along with our flowers, we have our baker fern here. We also happen to have some grevillea foliage tucked in, and some pennycrest, which really gives a very, very neat effect. So when we're talking centerpieces for the Thanksgiving holiday, we can go in the direction of arrangements in foam, but we can also go in the direction of designs that are done in water. Now this is a more traditional one in the sense that it's kind of very nice and packed in and so forth, but let me give you an example also of a water-based design that has a little bit more contemporary feel to it. If we look at this particular one, we've got some very interesting things going on. We happen to have, of course, a cylinder container rather than a more classical container. And in this particular case, on our cylinder container, we happen to have some of our aspidistra leaves coating the inside of it. This is a nice trend. It's a nice look. People love it. It gives an interesting effect, and it feels a little bit more 21st century. And then we have some very neat things going on here. We've got some amaranthus hanging down here. We've got some snapdragon in this design here and here and here. We've got a section with a couple of roses worked in. We have some lily buds worked in, and tulips, two of our orange tulips over on this side. The foliages vary in this one as well. We've got some of our grevillea foliage, and we also have some of this great pennycrest. Again, amazing materials that give a totally different look. So depending upon your tastes, if you happen to be a little bit more classical in your tastes, you can get centerpieces, and you can make centerpieces that have this kind of look to it, which are lovely. And you can also go a little bit more on the wild side with something that has a little more contemporary feel to it. Either one is great. They both are beautiful, and they both definitely get across the sense of the holiday. And we thought you'd enjoy seeing these as well. Now, when we're talking about Thanksgiving and we're talking about centerpieces, we have to think in terms of how these centerpieces are going to be used. They're going to be used as table setting places to make the table look pretty. They also are great to bring back after the meal when you're having dessert and coffee, and they can be very, very appropriate in both contexts. And when we're talking about centerpieces, we should also get in across the idea of the cornucopia. The cornucopia, or the horn of plenty, is certainly something that has become associated with this particular great holiday. And it is an interesting container in that it's a wicker-based container that we design in. And it's designed so that it's viewed generally at a 45-degree angle or viewed from the side, which makes it very, very nice as a centerpiece on our table. Again, this can be placed down before the meal. When the meal is put down there, it can be removed, then it can be brought back for coffee and dessert. It gives a very, very pretty effect, and it's a different kind of centerpiece. This particular cornucopia is a very, very pretty one. I have to tell you, our staff has been working very, very hard here at Rittners to come up with some really neat ideas for you for this particular holiday. And we've got a nice combination of things in this cornucopia. We have some of our roses, our traditional roses. Some of our palms are worked in here. An interesting factor of this one is a little hydrangea, green hydrangea. Some spray roses are tucked in here and there. And believe it or not, this is a sea-pod hydrangea, again brought to us by some of the great folks at Blooming of Beloit, Wisconsin, and some grevillea foliage coming out in all directions. It almost feels like pine and things that we have around Christmas time, but it isn't. It's grevillea foliage, and it gives a very, very nice effect. So we have a very, very pretty, contemporary, lush cornucopia for the Thanksgiving holiday. I think it's a lovely design. And again, this is to give you ideas, my viewer, as to different things you can do if you want to play with your flowers to come up with centerpieces for Thanksgiving, or if you're looking in terms of different kinds of centerpiece ideas that perhaps you'd like to go and pick up for your Thanksgiving table. Certainly we have a variety of things here that we have been showing you. Let's show you one that's a little bit bigger, because we seem to be working our way up the scale size-wise. Wow, look at this one. Isn't that amazing? Remember, tables do come in different lengths, and depending upon how many people you plan to entertain during this holiday and the size of your table, we can go from one extreme to another. This is an amazing arrangement. This could work very, very nicely as a table centerpiece because it's equally beautiful on all sides of this design. It also is an incredible design that could be used on a coffee table, could be put on a sideboard. This one would work well on a mantle. It would work well as people come into the home. But I like it as a centerpiece, which is what our primary goal is in terms of talking with you today. And we have some very, very interesting materials in this. I think this is a good example of how, when you're coming up with centerpieces for Thanksgiving, you can go in so many different directions material-wise. Let's take a look at some of the things that are used in this design. We have some of our kochia. Kochia is an amazing, amazing material. It's kind of a silvery white color, and it works so well with other materials as well. We have, again, some of our blooming grevillea here. The blooming grevillea here from the folks at Blooming of Beloit, Wisconsin. This happens to be red blooming grevillea, which I think is just amazing stuff. And it plays so well with some of the other materials we have. An ornamental kale. Kale has become so popular in the last few years. It gives a whole nice look to our design and very, very different than the classical kinds of things. So some blooming kale, ornamental kale right here in the center, giving us a nice focal point to our design. And then our arrangement is supported with a wide variety of things. We have some roses in orange and in yellow over here, here, and here that work so well. We also have some of the small Hannah asters that kind of create a great accent here and there through the design. We have some kangaroo paw over here, which is an unusual little flower that works very, very nicely in our arrangement. And we also have some of our, again, sea pod variety of hydrangea worked in here. There's some green trichdianthus here. That's the little green fuzzy flower that is so popular at the present time. And then we have some white lisianthus here and there in the arrangement. This is an amazing design. It has quite a combination of materials. And again, I think it shows how we can get larger in scale for our Thanksgiving holiday, keep an amazingly natural look on our design, and come up with some really, really cool things. I hope you enjoy this particular one because I think it is a very, very cool one in terms of possibilities for the holiday. Let me show you one more, my viewer, because again, we're trying to give you a variety of ideas, things that you may decide to play with. If you're looking for ideas in terms of coming up with different kinds of designs for Thanksgiving, this is an amazing, amazing centerpiece. Once again, this would require a fairly large table in order to be able to support this. In other words, this is not for a tiny dinette or kitchenette. This is for a very, very large table. It works very, very well in that capacity. We have all kinds of things in it. Once again, we've got the ornamental kale. We happen to have a wide variety of things in here. Some of our more traditional yellow roses are worked into this design here, here, and over there. And this is repeated on the other side of the design as well, so take my word on it, my viewer, it is there. We've got some of the kochia here, that's that silvery white material that works so well. We have some on this side as well, and a little bit here in the front. The design also incorporates, again, some of the Hannah little asters here and there worked through the arrangement. It gives a very, very pretty effect. Pennycrest, which is one of my favorite materials, is here and kind of gives us an accent here. And then, of course, we've got our combination of our red rovers, which happen to be here, here, and back here, facing in all directions, and some of our ornamental kale. So I think you can see, my viewer, here is another example of just an amazing design. We have tried to work it in our presentation here, my viewer, so that you can see that we go from one extreme to another. We can go from something that's very, very large like this to something that is a little bit more modest in size like this, and we can go from one extreme to another depending upon the size of the table, the amount of people that are going to be accommodated, and so forth. So, my viewer, let's move this over for a second, and we'll put this one back over here. And I think you can see we have some very, very interesting things going on as far as our floral designing for the holiday. Well, we've covered a lot of ground, my viewer. We've seen in this presentation how we can come up with table centerpieces for Thanksgiving that range in size from small to intermediate to quite large. We've seen that we can go from very, very classical expressions for the holiday to expressions that are a little bit more futuristic or way out, things that involve stuff like grevillea, flowering grevillea that gives an amazing effect. We've noticed that we can go from foam-based solutions to water-based designing, and that even within our water-based designing, we can go from something that is classical in feeling to something that is a little bit more in terms of cutting-edge type ideas. Our sizes vary, and we can come up with combinations in our designing that are truly amazing. I hope, my viewer, that you enjoyed this brief visit to Rittners Floral School in Boston. On behalf of all of us here at Rittners Floral School, I'm Dr. Steve Rittner, and it was a pleasure welcoming you into our classrooms today. Thank you.